It's 5 in the morning. You're in the heart of Appalachia. It's 1912. The fire in the wood stove has been burning for hours. The cast iron skillets on the back of the stove warming low and slow. Outside, it's still dark. It's cold. The garden's out there waiting for you to get in. There's a smokehouse and a spring house, and before the day is done, everything on this family's table will have come from within walking distance of where you're standing right now. There aren't any grocery stores. There's no delivery system. There's no backup plan. There's just the land, the knowledge that you have, the knowledge of the seasons, and of course, the women who understood all of this. Today, I want to take you there. I want to take you into a kitchen in a place that not a lot of people know about at a time in American history that most of us are unfamiliar with. We're going to be going and talking about what these granny women ate, how they grew their food, how they stored their food, how they cooked it, and what a full day of eating looked like for them and their families. And by the end of this episode, you're going to walk away with 3 things that you're going to be able to do in your own kitchen this week that's going to come directly from those traditions. I want to welcome you to the Sovereign Kitchen Society. I'm Molly Bravo, chef, food preservationalist, author, and of course, the founder of Wilder Space, our farm-to-table catering company in the Santa Cruz Mountains. This is a show about all the skills, the stories, and the knowledge that families have used to feed their family and feed themselves. Every episode, we go deep on the history, the technique, the information that you can use and leave with something actionable. If this is your first time here, welcome. I hope that you follow us on Instagram and TikTok at the Sovereign Kitchen Society, because that is where we share all of the recipe videos, the food preservation reels, canning content, and behind the scenes, all live. So come find us over there. Secondly, if you have been with us from the beginning, I want to thank you. This one is for you. We're going to talk first about the land and the life of what these women were going through back in the early 1900s in Appalachia. These were agrarian families, which means that the land was how they survived. So you kept a kitchen garden. It was not a hobby garden. It was a working garden, which means that it was measured in half-acre parcels that produced the food for your family so that you guys would have things to eat for literally every single month of the year. So they would be growing beans and potatoes, corn, cabbage, turnips, onions, sweet potatoes, whatever the soil and the seasons would provide. They kept animals, chickens for eggs and meat, a pig. Almost always, everybody had at least one pig, because a single hog, if it was properly butchered and put up in the smokehouse, could feed a family through most of the winter. They usually always had a milk cow, if you were fortunate enough to have one, and the men usually hunted. So they would hunt squirrel and rabbit, deer, wild turkey. And this is what enough looked like back then. This is life back in the early 1900s, okay? So people weren't necessarily starving, but one of the biggest misconceptions about Appalachian mountain life was that because it wasn't fancy, because they didn't have a whole lot of money, it doesn't mean that it wasn't sufficient. The table didn't have these super fancy roasts and pastries and imported goods, but they definitely were not deprived. And so there are historical records, some of which are my favorite. If you haven't heard of the Foxfire Collection, I highly recommend it. It is a bunch of high school kids that interviewed women from Appalachian counties for like 20 plus years. And they talked about the foodways. They talked about the people who lived in these areas and showed people how to eat well with skill and knowledge and the willingness to use every single thing that the land and the seasons had to offer. The table was full. They always had soup beans and cornbread, and that was typically the foundational meal of Appalachian life. Pinto beans simmered for hours with a really nice piece of salt pork, served with skillet cornbread baked in lard. It fed everyone. It cost almost nothing and made well with the right beans that had been dried the right way with the correct amount of salt and the amount of time that it cooked over a slow fire. It was genuinely delicious. A day in the life of a kitchen back then. I'm going to just take you through what a full day looked like because I think that this stuff is really fascinating. I'm hoping that you think that it's fascinating also. So before dawn, the fire goes into the stove. And the morning's biscuits are usually mixed by hand. There's lard that's cut into flour, buttermilk stirred in, shaped and set to bake. And the biscuits go with everything. So you have eggs from the hens, maybe a slice of cured ham from the smokehouse if it's been a good year. You have coffee or a substitute made with roasted grain if the coffee wasn't available at that time. And that was breakfast for people who were about to do a 12-hour day of intense physical labor. Midday, you would probably come in, and that was typically the biggest meal of the day. Dinner in the Appalachian tradition was usually the noontime meal. It was the meal that needed to carry you through the heaviest part of the workload, and it typically happened in the afternoon. So the beans from the pot that had been simmering since morning are ready to go. You have wilted lettuces that are called kilt lettuce. It's oftentimes like leafy greens that are dressed with a hot bacon grease and a little bit of vinegar. They're like kind of limp and rich, and they have this delicious pot liquor that is just cooking those greens. And then of course, you can eat them straight from the bowl. They're home-fried potatoes, cornbread, whatever was in season from the garden. And if there was meat, it was most often smoked or salt-cured because that's what they could do without refrigeration. In the evening, they would eat something a little bit lighter. They would have the leftover beans, cold cornbread, maybe a little bit of milk and bread if you had it, and maybe some sweet potatoes baked into the coals. The point was that nothing from that midday meal was wasted. It was transformed into the evening meal, and then the pot went back on for the next day. That pot is a very instrumental piece in the kitchen, and it's something that we talk about a lot at Wilder Space because that pot never got cold. It was continuously simmering and cooking away. It either had beans or broth or whatever the season offered, but it was always the focal point of the kitchen. It was never empty. Something was always going into it. It was called the never-ending pot, and it would feed people for years. I also want to share a little bit about the alchemy of all of this. Alchemy is huge in the kitchen. Alchemy in the old sense meant the transformation of a base of materials into something greater. And we talked about this a little bit in the last episode. It would oftentimes be known for turning lead into gold or the crude into the refined. That's the same thing with food. You could take a really basic ingredient, not do a whole lot to it, and through the act of alchemy and infusing your energy into a dish, you can heal the sick, you can feed the weak, and they are going to feel incredible because of the energy that you are putting into that dish. So back in Appalachian kitchens, they used alchemy a lot. You would take a handful of dried beans, a piece of salt pork, water, heat, and you would create something nourishing and complex and deeply satisfying that sustained all of your family through those days of really hard physical labor. You could take cornmeal and lard and buttermilk and transform it into bread. You could take water left in the pot after cooking your greens, like the pot liquor that we were talking about, and turn it into medicine. So that is the tradition of granny medicine and granny magic and granny food that we talk about in Appalachian culture. That is the magic of what we're sharing. People were transforming simple materials just by using their hands in everyday life. The next thing I want to talk about is why preservation changes everything. You guys know that I love food preservation. I have been on this wagon sharing about it consistently day in and day out. And Appalachian culture is no different. You know, this particular cooking style and food preservation style only works if you actually know how to preserve your food. So the garden is something that would go on year round, but it couldn't feed you during January and February and those winter months. So you need to know how to put up your vegetables, how to put up your fruits. These people knew how to do that very well. They would take a hog that obviously would not stay fresh without refrigeration. They would smoke it. It would last for years. They would take the beans that came out of the ground in August and wouldn't reach the table until February. There was always a woman who knew exactly what to do to either dry the beans, to preserve the beans in some way so that they had stuff to eat during the winter. Preservation was not a side skill. It was literally necessary in order to survive back then, because back then there were no roads, there were no cars. You were literally living on exactly what you could provide for your family on that particular piece of land. Granny women would spend entire weeks in the late summer, in the early fall, doing nothing but putting up food. How far away are we from that lifestyle? They would pack food in crocks, making sauerkraut. They would cure the pork. They would fill the root cellar with potatoes and turnips and sweet potatoes and apples. And this wasn't just like some weekend project. This was a full-time seasonal occupation that these women would do together in community, supporting one another and raising children. The knowledge required that you know how to do it correctly, how to put up food that would actually keep without making anyone sick, that would still be nutritious and safe months down the line when you would open up that jar, and it would taste like something that was made with love. That's the most important thing. Preservation is the foundation of everything that we do in the Sovereign Kitchen Society. It's because it is all about survival. Without it, the rest of your pantry is not even going to exist. So if you want to go deep on preservation, on this preservation piece, the actual techniques, the science, the step-by-step water bath and pressure canning done right, I highly recommend that you check out our canning cookbook. It's called the Essential Canning Cookbook, and it is the best place to start. It is available at all major book retailers right now. Please go grab your copy. I would be so stoked. This is truly the foundation. This is the science and the technique and the confidence that you can put your food up the right way. I want you to remember that a full pantry is freedom. These are 3 things that you can start doing this week. You know that I love to give you 3 simple tips, action items that you can get started on right away. The 3 quick wins for you are this. They're all pulled directly from these granny women that we've been talking about in the last couple of episodes. It's all about tradition, and it's all about things that are doable that you can start right now. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to make a pot of soup. I want you to make specifically soup beans that are made from scratch. So you can use dried pinto beans, a piece of salt pork or bacon, a little bit of water, a pot. That's literally all you need. You're going to soak them overnight. You're going to boil them low and slow. You're going to leave them on the back of your stove. And that way, when your family comes in, they will have something that they can eat right away. The second thing is that I want you to make a nice, beautiful skillet of cornbread that's going to go alongside those beans. You're going to eat it the way that it was eaten back then. Nothing fancy, but you're going to eat those beans in a bowl with a little bit of cornbread crumpled on top or on the side. You're going to serve yourself a little bit of that pot liquor that was saved, and you're going to drink it separately. What you're going to start to understand is how good you feel when you eat simply, when you eat from the land, and when you eat something that you're making from scratch, because you're taking the time to do it. You're infusing your energy into that dish, and you know that you are feeding your family a nutrient-dense meal. The third thing I want you to do is I want you to make kilt lettuce. Maybe you don't know where any kilt lettuce is. That's okay. It's one of those old Appalachian dishes that is rarely talked about outside of the region, but it is one of the most immediately satisfying things that you're going to be able to eat this week. You're going to take a whole bowl of leaf lettuce, loose leaves. So you're not going to use like iceberg or anything, but you are going to serve it with a little bit of green onion. You're going to put it into a pan. You're going to render 4 or 5 slices of bacon until all of the fat is rendered out and the bacon is nice and crisp. You're going to pull that bacon out. You're going to add those greens to the hot pan. You're going to add in a splash of apple cider vinegar, maybe a little bit of a pinch of salt, so it's salty and sweet and tangy and hot and delicious. It's going to sizzle. You're going to pour that over your beans. You're going to serve it with your cornbread, and you are going to enjoy the bright acidity and the fat of that delicious meal. I promise you, you are going to love it. It is going to be a family favorite. Typically, these greens were made with the first spring greens of the season, but it's summer and we have an abundance of all kinds of really good things. So if you don't want to use a basic spring green, you can always use a spinach or a collard green would be really great. Maybe some kale. Last but not least, this is just a little added bonus. I want you to work on creating a continuous pot, meaning that this is going to be a little bit of a mindset shift for you and more than it is a recipe. I want you to think about having this continuous pot always going on the stove so that it's not about menu planning, but it's about adding to something that you already have so that when people are coming in and they're super hungry and they want food, they know that there's always something hot on the back of the stove that they can grab right away. So you're going to have the beans from yesterday as maybe a base. Maybe you want to add in a little bit of chicken or some pork And then that turns into tomorrow's soup. And then maybe you want to turn that into a plate for tacos that you're going to eat in a couple of days. The goal is to keep those beans going. When you make anything that produces a liquid, like a pot of beans or a roasted chicken or cooked vegetables, please do not throw that away. Do not throw that liquid away. I want you to save it, refrigerate it, and the next time that you need to make something that calls for water, you're going to be adding that liquid. So you're going to get all of those nutrients, all of the minerals, and of course, added flavor, just layer upon layer of flavor that is going to enhance whatever it is that you're making. So you're building depth into your dishes. That is something that these women always do. It was something that they were famous for. They're still famous for. And it is the simplest practice that you can start today. It is going to change your kitchen. I promise you that. So I want to leave you with a picture. I want to leave you with the idea of what a kitchen looked like in 1912 in Wayne County, West Virginia. Imagine you're hanging out with my family back there. There's a woman. Maybe she is standing at a wood stove in the early morning. The fire's going. The beans are on. The biscuits are almost done. And outside, the garden is starting to come in. The smokehouse is full from last fall. The root cellar still has potatoes in it. This lady isn't worried. She's not worried about what she's going to make for dinner. She knows what dinner is going to be. She knows because she has the skills and the pantry and the knowledge that nobody can take away from her. So that is what we're building here at the Sovereign Kitchen Society. This isn't about a hobby. This is a true lifestyle change. It's a mindset shift. It's all about building a pantry so that you can build freedom into your life, so that you can build a skill set that is going to make you the person that knows how to do all of these things, that knows how to feed your family, no matter what is happening in the world outside. The Sovereign Kitchen Society is how we build these things together. It's something that we do in person. We also do it online. We have a cookbook. We have workshops. We have online classes. We have live videos where you can step in on TikTok or Instagram, and you can watch me cooking live. We can do it together, and you can ask any questions that you have in real time. The Pantry of Plenty is where we go deep on these systems. So you can find all of that at wilderspace.com/education. The link is going to be in the show notes. Come find us on Substack for the companion piece to this episode. We're going to be talking way more about Appalachian granny magic, granny wisdom, granny women, and the food ways and the specific preservation techniques that families have been using for literally hundreds of years. And of course, last but not least, do come check us out on Instagram and TikTok at the Sovereign Kitchen Society, where we have recipe videos, canning reels, preservation how-tos, the real day-to-day of building a sovereign kitchen. We are there every single day. I would love to connect. I would love to be friends. Last but not least, if you could leave us a review, it matters more than you will ever know. So if this episode taught you anything, if it moved something inside of you, if it made you want to go cook a pot of beans tonight, I implore you, please leave us a review. It is like 60 seconds of your time. It's how new people find this show, and every person who finds it is because of your review. I'm Molly Bravo. This is the Sovereign Kitchen Society. I want you to remember that food is and always will be our medium for connection. I'll see you next time.